There you go. Exactly. And it does help. I get it. We forget to do it all the time. Do the little snap thing, and then I'm in there and it's like, okay, that wave profile looks pretty similar, and jarring around, and then you're trying to match them up. It can make the editing process a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you can line up the audio, that's the way to go. All right, so Jason Mallory, welcome down, man.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you. Haven't been down to the Roadhouse since we kind of first moved in here, which was like, I think the end of 19 we moved in here, and so it was around that time that we met, I believe.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? That you were in Morgan Hill around that time?
I was campaigning at the Chevron.
Yeah,
and I met Austin at the gas station.
Right. So yeah. Let's get there. Let's just go ahead and jump in. So, the way we met was I was getting gas at like 10 o'clock at night or something at the Chevron on Monterey, and here comes this dude with a clipboard. And you're wearing like a white tracksuit or something like that, right?
Yeah, Jordans.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And you come walking up, and I'm just like, what? It's like, what? Like, who is this guy? Like, I gotta give my like stone cold, like, don't fuck with me look or something. And I'm all there, and you walk up, and you're like, you ask, what did you ask? What did you ask everybody when you walked up?
Something along the lines of, will you help me get on the ballot to propose some solutions in government?
Right, which to my ears came out like, right? And I'm just like, buddy, whatever you're selling, I'm not interested. And then you said, do you know Andrew Yang? Or of Andrew Yang and UBI? And I had just the week before come to know of Andrew Yang and his candidacy for president and what universal basic income, the concept of that even was at all. And so at the moment that you said that, I said to you, I was like, man, I said, if you'd said anything else, like I was going to blow you off. I was like, but okay, I'm interested.
Yang got it, huh?
Yeah, well, it's universal basic income, and I want to get into that. Of course, we'll get into that later on as this progresses, because it's something that I think about often with AI and machine learning. But so talk about what you were trying to get on the ticket though, right? You were trying to, was it state senate?
I got the nomination, and it's for Congress.
Mm.
So like 80 to 90% of these elections are not competitive elections. Zoe Lefgren is the incumbent here. It's a 2-year term. She's been there for 26 years. They're not competitive elections really, but it's where you would propose a new federal law. And what I basically solved better than Andrew Yang did was how to responsibly assimilate automation, how to have technology in the economy without impoverishing all the formerly employable people. So I solved this in a way that's not just a simple UBI. There is a UBI aspect to it, but the most important part really is a citizen's right that would enable the labor force and the consumer base, which when people do the work are the same thing. When we separate those things and the consumer base is not the technological labor force, basically a right that patches that so the consumer base still owns the labor force. And we can keep a natural check and balance in supply and demand that way. We can keep the people able to move the country forward, the world forward, instead of whomever controls massive amounts of labor. And today that's not
right in my eye. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
Continue.
So today it's not too big of a deal, but when technology is able to do 10, 20 times more work than all of humanity combined, who controls that, right? And rather than a ominous global cabal or a dictator or whatever, if people have the right to vote for what their share of the workforce is or isn't doing, and to be able to vote for that share to be able to be utilized by themselves to start a business and have competitive tools, we can build a middle class post-automation. So the economic policy, what you could pencil into the bottom of the Constitution, would be that every citizen has the right to one equal share of the automated labor force, an equal vote for what it does or does not perform, and a fair share of what's produced as a whole.
So, but now make that distinction between UBI and that. I'm not sure I completely, because it seems to me like that is core to what UBI is proposing as well.
UBI is just saying, here's a check.
With no voting rights.
Exactly.
So you're not necessarily a stakeholder or a shareholder, right? It's like at that point, you are just simply
paid to not have a job or vote.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
From my perspective. So what I'm proposing is a different socioeconomic system. And there is a UBI aspect. But it's like when all the people are displaced by technology, all those income taxes are no longer able to be paid.
Right.
So basically what I'm proposing is to have automated labor, robots and whatnot, rented hourly. And from that hourly wage, you can have an income tax, a robot tax. And that would then go towards funding a UBI. So if we do that today, it's going to be not that much. Not Andrew Yang's $1,000 a month. No, that's 50 to 75% increase of the federal tax revenue, to tell you the truth. No.
In other words, it's unaffordable.
Pretty much. It can be done, but it can also like maybe mess things up or maybe make government too top heavy in a lot of ways. But what we could do is if it started at $10 or $100 or wherever that's at, if for the amount of automated labor that's out there, for the amount of robots doing jobs that are doing them, their income tax goes to pay the displaced workers. So if that's, one robot per one worker that was human to, modern day, not a whole lot of money. Well, 30 years down the road, all the cars are automated, all the
Is it even that far away?
Well, if we're looking at having...
manufacturing in the next 10 years. Manufacturing in the next 10 years, dude.
Yeah, 3D printing is going to change it.
It is. I was involved with a company a couple of years ago that... I can't talk about the technology, but once it clicked in my head, I'll say that 3D printing was a huge part of it. And when it clicked in my head, the implications of what they were working towards, I was like, you're going to disrupt so many sectors, so many industries, so many jobs. Like I couldn't be a part of it anymore. It was so simple, and that's why it's so effective. It's frightening.
We're able to stagger things, right? Like the OLED screens, that was set up with distribution in 2006, but you didn't see them until the patents ran out, and then we were importing them from outside manufacturers. And it's because we're trying to basically make as much as we can out of staggering retail. That's something that happens in the consumer markets.
Who is that regulated by? Like the World Trade Organization or what?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Companies saying, let's sell all of the LCDs before we upgrade with the OLED.
That's a cycle, right? It's like let's wear out the market on this technology before we introduce another technology, because then your all the money you've invested in the first technology may just go to waste. You may have orders upon orders because
R&D
it takes a long time to get that product into the store.
Yeah, play out your first album and tour it.
Yeah,
before
exactly
you make
right.
3 of them.
Exactly
and say,
right.
Hey,
Good. Yes, thank you.
you.
Perfect analogy for all the musicians listening right now.
Yeah. So similarly, we have that in retail. So as we're looking at the product of automated labor, if you're making a robot that can go in and do some job, like Baxter, you could literally grab its hands and have it be able to learn a job, or like the Da Vinci robotic surgeon. That's not replacing a minimum wage job. That's replacing surgeons, and it's a better than human hand. Right, humans are trying to do arthroscopy with a tool, but something that's more native to that is going to be way better.
Yep.
So as we're looking at those products and how they're brought into the workforce, today it's not so many. So like a the income tax from the robot would be not too much. The UBI would be very small. But in the future, when there's 10 times more than people of automated labor and we're able to be a highly effective labor force, our population is no longer dictating what amount of work we can get done. It's not that you have one horse and one plow, it's that you got a tractor, right?
Which we have right now. We have GPS robotically controlled tractors right now. I mean, that's already there.
And when the tractor became a thing, it replaced 19 out of 20 farmers.
Right.
We got the Dust Bowl out of it. We got the book The Grapes of Wrath. We got
Steinbeck,
Hooverville,
just down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, Cannery Row.
Yep.
And we had economic refugees also. We had the Okies. We had Hoovervilles. We had local governments in the United States saying, here's a fraudulent advertisement to get out of town to go pick fruit in California.
Yes.
We can't, when it's one technology like a tractor, one industry, other industries are able to absorb that. Like the auto, Detroit was starting then, but when it's something like digital technology, when it's global and across all industries, we can't push it into a different industry the same. It just, the numbers aren't there.
Every time that I hear someone make a comparison to the Industrial Revolution to today, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, no, you're completely wrong in the sense that, yes, there was a mechanism that could replace a certain number of people, but it still needed a monitoring system, and it still was archaic in understanding something like lubricants or wear or things like this, right? So you needed a labor force, a skilled labor force. We were actually talking about no such thing as unskilled labor just a couple weeks ago on the podcast, but you needed people to maintain all these things. It will be to the point that the AI, that there will be sensors that exist on that do this is today, that are monitoring the wear on any aspect of a machine that's building something, that's manufacturing something right now, and so they can be ahead of the ordering process and not have any downtime, right? Where you have the flu and you have downtime, it's like in this case, and then during the Industrial Revolution, you might have a bearing go out and you had all this downtime, and now it's like they can be so far ahead of it, they could have a replacement sitting there ready to go before it ever actually wears out. Like they could plan into their manufacturing cycle downtime for this machine to repair it and whatnot. And so I don't think it's the same thing. I think we can displace nearly all jobs except the people who do work on the robots.
Yeah, I mean, human decision making is a big deal, I think, rather than whomever controls all that labor or force or what have you, or Skynet, right? Which might end up being, I think we live in somewhat of an algocracy. What algorithm from YouTube says this video is getting play, this one's not, right? An algocracy. Algorithms running things. So with that being essentially digital government, right? We've got something else running it that's not a human decision because it's able to make so many decisions based on a presumption. And it's way more efficient, right? One person can write an algorithm, like a math equation.
Yes, right.
and be able to affect across an entire website or whatever. So it makes, it's not Skynet. It's not in control of the nuclear bombs or whatever, but we're going that way. I think most of my life I was like, that's a bad idea. And as other technologies have become, specifically like microbiological stuff, being able to be much more accessible, and the ability to do things that might affect masses of people, as those technologies are growing, I believe so is an acceptance of a surveillance state for safety reasons.
Yep.
Although it doesn't make me feel comfortable. I mean, people want to masturbate alone.
Right, and not have their cameras turned on when they're doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean,
we are. Well, I mean, every time that we agree to the terms and conditions, Well, just the other day, I was texting someone for a friend, and they were asking about their cat. And so, I don't have a cat. And this was over text, right? Presumably a private conversation between two people going on. The next day, on one of the social media networks, I go on there and there's advertisement for Purina cat chow.
Very pure internet connection.
Yeah, right? Solid. Thank you guys for watching all of our conversations. And so of course it's a computer that's watching the conversations, and I think oddly enough that's what desensitizes us a little bit. It's like if we thought that Sarah was watching everything that we were watching on our phones, which there are actually physical monitors out there that do look for criminal activity, through some of these things. But I think it's like, well, computers, like I've reasoned this myself. These computers are taking in, what is it, like petabytes or something of data every day. Like it's an insane amount of information that's being, brought in. And so why would it matter, like me? Like you mentioned earlier, I'm a transparent guy. Like I have nothing to hide. I'm not embarrassed of anything that I've done. I don't want everybody knowing my business, but at the same time, like, okay, but I'm doing that in exchange for what? What is the value back to me by giving them this? Convenience, right? Convenience of connectivity? Convenience of information, maybe?
Eventually, it's an evolution of humans.
Mm-hmm. It's the integration. It's part of the integration of ourselves and the computers.
Yeah.
We're allowing them to have all this access to us when we're okay with it already. We're already okay with it. Just decades into the internet. It didn't take a century to move us there,
I just like to say that
it took porn.
United States
That's what it took. It took porn.
There are people that are working on these things. Zoltan Istvan started. He's a Republican now, but he started the U.S. Transhumanist Party to make the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, which is essentially freedom and liberty, but being translated into evolution. We are the first generation, or publicly known anyway, to be able to evolve our own genetics in a single generation instead of having children to make new genetics. That's a different species. We can use CRISPR to do this.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask about CRISPR actually, which is a DNA aspect of
it's cut and paste.
Taking out, like, down to the level of recognizing when you're genetically engineering this child, like you take these aspects out of the DNA that you're fertilizing, that you're creating the embryo out of, and then you only paste in the stuff you want. Like, is that what we mean?
So if you're looking at like an entire chromosome, right? That's a lot of DNA, and we have many chromosomes. 23andMe or what have you.
Right.
How many
sure.
chromosomes? So CRISPR can do like a single, like rather than looking at the entire program of YouTube website, it's like looking at 1 1 or 1 0, right? It's just looking at the bits.
Like at binary level.
Yeah.
Okay.
So CRISPR is used to be able to, it can see like, okay, I'm looking for this strand. I'm looking for this phrase, sentence, or whatever in a book.
Right.
Right. It's not saying I'm going to rewrite the whole chapter. It technically probably could, but it can go find the sentence and change that sentence or single letter or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very, very powerful tool because not all genes are an entire chromosome. It's one little piece. So the ability to go in there and find those things and change those things, that's something we could do pretty easily now. So like with the COVID vaccinations, like the mRNA plasmid you could use a plasmid, and you could essentially have your macrophages learn a DNA code. And it's now able to find that DNA code and say, oh, I recognize that virus because I have the DNA code of it, right? So that's how you're doing that.
You're querying a database.
Yeah, but
it's an algorithm that's querying a database.
You can now put information in and out of the individual cells databases. To be able to like do that to every single cell in your body, pretty tough. Adenoviruses are able to do some of those things, but like it's not. Your body has fail-safes to stuff messing with it, our immune systems and whatnot. But as far as being able to build an immune system, yeah, we're going to eventually, I think, we're at the point with microbiology where computers were at like 1989, 1992 maybe.
Gotcha.
Where it's like you don't really need antivirus software back in the 80s. You know what I mean? The internet was an FTP account.
Right.
It's kind of like you got to be able to pull the plug on your computer.
Yes.
Right? But antivirus software wasn't a thing.
Sure. In
2020, does everything work right all the time? Is anybody else, observing whether or not you have a cat? That's a whole different situation. So I think what happened with programming digitally, I see that as something that might similarly happen to programming genetically, and the ability to have CAR T cells or what have you to have a more advanced immune system that we can update easy without necessarily making us not ourselves.
Okay, wow. Like, what would that look like? Does that look like little bitty robots that now become your immune system?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or being able to put little bitty robots as parts of cells in your cells. It's easier to control existing media than to create a new one. Although, so I invested in a Cernova. They make a cell pouch, and it's like you'll be able to stick this thing under your skin and have a separate immuno environment. So they can basically cure diabetes. You don't have to put a shot in yourself.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that. My thought on it is that's a whole nother organ. You can put whatever in there.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, is it a filtering system? It's like identify what any of your organs do for you, and this would be an additional aspect. I mean, yeah, sure. Wow.
So entering this kind of a realm, there's the ability to do harm or good, right? And for us to be able to evolve, to be able to be content, to be able to have a peaceful world, to not be terrorized of viruses and things, might bring about a greater acceptance of a surveillance state to make sure those things aren't happening, even though it is creepy that there's an AI looking at you.
All right, so all right, I'm gonna say it. Or do we have somebody showing up? That's Sam,
sure. Yeah.
Drummer. So let's step back a little bit, and then I'll get there. With UBI, with AI machine learning, right? And I throw those things together. I'll just say AI, but both are important because AI is one function. Machine learning is the ability for that AI to teach itself, right? To continue to grow and to refine. So in any case, with the idea that we will become a displaced workforce, that in many ways is a scary proposition, right? Like it could be that the overlords of industry, that they run the machines, leave the rest of us impoverished, and we fight it out amongst ourselves, and it's dystopia, and
how do they sell their products?
Exactly right. And that is what keeps me hopeful, right? That they have a motivation for continuing to produce so that there is consumption and the machine continues to go. So is the positive side of looking at where we're headed in terms of not having to go in and doing a job that you hate 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week or more, you know, and instead being able to focus on living a life like you more would enjoy living, right? Like
to make friends, not tools.
That was beautiful. That was a very nice way of saying that. And it's true because we do use each other, right? As long as I say often, you need to fix money if you want to fix our problems. And money is in itself an enormous solution. So how do you fix the best solution that we have in terms of not, you know, exchanging those 2 stools and half a tank of gas for a steak, you know?
Yeah, I mean, barter systems are nowhere near as well lubricated in society, I would say.
It's not. I don't want to go there. I don't.
Yeah. No, me neither. And I think we're still going to be using probably nationalized currencies.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are globalized currencies that also can make you locatable globally and can permeate societies. Blockchains are really cool. So I got asked about blockchain voting, right? And I said that's a great idea if you only ever have to have one election. So if everybody, you know, it's fully transparent who voted for what, or that over a network an AI can see who voted for what. Now that election turned out everything's accounted for. The next election, you now have the data set of who's probably going to vote for what. So, hey, here's a Bitcoin if you vote for this guy instead of this guy. Or, hey, here's some ransomware if you're going to vote for that guy. Or whatever. You know what I mean?
Then that can already exist. I mean, it does already kind of exist to some extent. I like the idea of decentralizing these things. I like the idea of having a constant ledger that could be reviewed. Like, I like blockchain technology. I like cryptocurrency. I do.
The ability to anonymize who is doing what vote. That's a very important thing for the integrity of democracy in the future. While that single election might turn out great, the now data set that can be used to manipulate future elections exists. So to be able to anonymize,
I kind of feel like that's already there. I think we're already there, though, right? I mean, the amount of analytics that goes on already, I mean, if anything, maybe it would help to bring the expense of running campaigns down, because they're not carpet bombing so often that they could be more targeted with it. But that's what's so frightening about the analytics that we have available to us, is how targeted we can become with our message and guide people, people who don't have a ton of time to really expend studying the different aspects of the candidates that they're ultimately going to be voting for. And we keep ourselves distracted. Even if we did have that time, we keep ourselves distracted so that we just kind of end up going blue or red or red or blue, And
our leadership quality suffers.
It does. It does tremendously, because we're only looking for what the analytics says this person is electable, right? Not the populace says this person is saying what we believe is right for our governance to move forward.
Yeah. So that's why I am proposing the concept of soapbox talks and the ability to have like a 10-minute video for every candidate. So instead of all the advertisements, money, or what you can steamroll in, the analytics start to become less important, because the voter in the county voter guide, hopefully, as I've been trying to push into the Secretary of State through soapboxtalks.com, is if every candidate had a 10-minute talk and you could, here's the election, this guy for 10 minutes, who he is, what he wants to do, and how he's going to do it, then his competition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. here's everyone doing that. Line them up right next to each other. Who do you want to vote for?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not money from a different country influencing you.
The money. If you always look at the money, I believe that the reason why we have 2-year presidential cycles in terms of campaign cycles, right? Because it starts 2 years. I mean, you get 2 years, and then all of a sudden, I mean, they're already talking about it. I'm listening to the radio the other day, and it's already talking about, who can actually compete against Trump. Like, they're already discussing. It's like let's discuss what needs to happen now. Like, how do we solve the problems? Let's discuss the issues and not the brands, because that's what it is. It's branding.
It's a front man.
Yes, it is branding. What is the brand that will get us where we want to go? What is the brand that will get us the money that we want to have?
Zach De La Rocha, not the guy with the guitar.
Yeah, right.
Whatever, like that kind of situation where you've got, you got to push your marketing plan forward. That's what's electable. That's what goes through the clank of those are your options. Deal with it. Instead of being able to have more merit-based things, measured decisions as opposed to red or blue, where it ends up removing the principles of democracy, which we hope to be able to function on as a constitutional republic. The ability to have the people decide who they'd like their leaders to be isn't being fortified by having gigantic marketing plans and non-competitive districting. It's not like that's producing we the people. And what that is producing is ominous deep state and establishment of a circus that is in control. So with that being how our government's evolving for, the security of the military-industrial complex, it's not like we're not going to have to make changes as people kind of recognize those things. So I think the ability to fortify our elections through soapboxtalks.com, through being able to have more informed voters, right? You can actually see the competition, and it's not just, well, I vote D, I vote R.
Right.
But here's, merit-based decision making.
Right.
Here's the plan of what the person's proposing to do.
If we could, it is. We're so fragmented in this country. I mean, we're just so fragmented, and I believe that the media and the population, the media and the politicians have done an awful. Frankly, the guys who work for the politicians have really worked very hard at driving wedges between us, which is sad. I like. What's the barrier to entry? Like, you always have to look at something and say, what's the barrier to acceptance? Like, how do we get to a critical mass so that something like soapboxtalks.com is valued by a large enough population to be effective, right? So that this became how things move forward. I'm suspecting you're going to say that it involves something you're going to be writing and pushing an aspect that this kind of has to happen.
I think it's a great evolutionary progress for county voter guides to be able to have a digital version, for candidates not to have to pay large sums of money. Depending on the district in California, it might be more than a teacher's annual salary to pay the fees to be printed in the voting guide. So
that's crazy.
In my opinion, it's kind of like the very first tax dollar should go towards the legitimacy of collecting any tax dollar for having legitimate elections. Because, I mean, when it boils down to it, if you say, hey, who told you were a law enforcement officer? Or who told you you are fighting for the United States of America in any military branch or anything, it eventually boils down to an elected position from we the people. So if that has a teacher can't afford to have their name on the ballot even if nominated with their entire annual salary, we do have an issue there. But if there's a digital
and the way around that is
version,
you
that can be
immediately
free.
start to go and raise money, and when you raise money, that brings in outside influence, and
That
therefore
person's no
someone
longer
who
the
started
leader.
out with all the right intention
Yeah.
and all the right plan and all the right approach, that pathway gets corrupted because you have to focus on the money.
You end up having hooks put in you,
Yes.
and that is not producing uncorrupted leadership.
No.
So yeah, how if we do a digital
It's birthing
version,
corrupt.
right? Like if you can, it doesn't matter how many times the web page is viewed. Really, it's a very small amount of electricity and very small cost.
Yeah.
So if we're able to foot the bill, because it's not that big even, and not have those paywalls, pay barriers, corruption leakage points, then we're able to start fixing some of that, fixing our elections in a in the right way.
Fixing the elections. Not that that's happened at all recently. So one thing I was thinking about was in that very positive way of looking at what automation is bringing to our world. It would be that by no longer having to dedicate 40 hours or more a week, if you consider also like commuting and whatnot goes into it, several hours a week into your job, then perhaps you have guitar player. Have a musician show. Brett's here. But that you would have more time to dedicating to educating yourself about the issues and about what politicians are there available. Like it kind of makes me think about what it might have been like in Athens at one point in history, where it was really about educating oneself and growing your knowledge base and dedicating your time towards what's important in life and not towards stamping out the next product,
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why we're a constitutional republic. That's part of why we vote for representatives that actually vote for the other things. We try to be democracy as much as possible as a country, and that's truly the goal. But at the same time, it requires education. It requires, understanding of math.
Mm-hmm.
It requires, the 3 kids in the back seat not outvoting their mom. We're not going to school. We're going to Disneyland and spending the money.
Right.
So the ability to move forward in a way where the people are on board with what we need to do, and to keep that focused on how to make content people, how to make sustainable life, how to make it a good place.
How do you? The thing is, like, how do you live the life that you might envision, right? When like, how do you increase your income in this world? Like, do we end up trading incomes? Like, is there an additional currency that we trade? Is that what cryptocurrency is? Like, I don't know. How do you go from being someone who's guaranteed X, as everyone else is guaranteed these things, and then but you want something more? And I don't necessarily mean like even spending power, but that is the solution. Like, if I want to do this instead of this, or I would like to go here, but do you just have to save? Like, you sacrifice this? I don't know, man.
I'm picturing like a man in a suit who's made all of the money, but it doesn't mean he has spiritual wealth.
Sure.
Or but he may have made it so many families can, or what have you. Necessarily having the money doesn't necessarily mean you have sanity.
But if it's, I mean, how do you buy a plane ticket? Like, if you're guaranteed this much money every month, like, how do you buy 3 plane tickets? How do you buy a family a plane ticket and spend 2 weeks somewhere? Because you can spend 2 weeks there because you no longer have a job. Hell, you can spend 2 years there because you no longer have a job you have to get back to. But like, how do you afford to get there if it is limited? You know what I mean? The idea of capitalism a free market would be that you can start with an idea and, a hammer in your hand or some bullshit like that, and then become a gazillionaire, right? And frankly, I know people that's kind of exactly what happened to them, that they worked hard, saved their money, invested smartly and everything, and did well. And I'm not saying that becoming a wealthy person in terms of holding dollars is my goal personally, but it is a solution. And so what happens when that ability is taken out of our hands?
Yeah, so that you become sedated as a people. Creativity is like, great, draw it on a piece of paper. Don't use the hammer, right? It becomes what we're really looking for.
Well, machine's going to go do whatever you need to do anyway.
We're looking for freedom and liberty, basically. Having the money and being able to spend it too with your time, right? That's the end goal, to have freedom and liberty like that. So as we're looking at being able to build those things, like what was it, the Matrix movie? The construct of the society. The architect said, "Yeah, we've made 6 or 7 of these."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We made Utopia.
Yeah.
It got rejected.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So as far as the drama of life or what have you, as far as being able to make fulfilled, content, worthwhile time, I think that's an individual thing, really. There's philosophy.
Yeah.
However that might translate. As far as being able to enable those things economically, the free markets, capitalism, have been the best at doing that, to my knowledge.
We were talking earlier, some of this actually may have ended up on the footage that we did of the mobile soapbox, the Sacramento soapbox, as a matter of fact, to be more specific. Soapbox number 1.
Yes.
Hopefully of many. But we were talking about the idea that capitalism has, there are many good aspects to capitalism, but the future of capitalism probably should not look like it does today.
Balancing supply and demand is going to be difficult without wealth distribution when you automate the labor force. So instead of just having wealth distribution through UBI or something like that, not today, but in the future, as this is, when the industrialists say, well, there's no one for us to sell our products to anymore.
Right.
Hey, government, give them money. Right? When that occurs,
we're kind of there.
Yeah. So as we're looking at that kind of a balancing, what I hope not to dilute is the individual value of a person. So we have rights in the United States, and that's what makes us a value. So the ability to have a value in the economy when you basically can't have a job because they're automated, right? Or at least a growing percentage of people. When humans are obsolete in the workforce, in order to have an economic value, what I'm suggesting that every citizen have the right to one equal share of the automated labor force, an equal vote for what it does or does not perform, and a fair share of what it produces, there's the leverage. That's determinant to economic existence. And it also makes sure that people are in control of where society goes, as opposed to whomever's in control of the labor force, that frankly doesn't need people.
One fair share sounds awfully communistic, doesn't it?
One vote per citizen, right?
Right.
What a communist concept.
I know. Well, one thing that's been striking me recently is I was thinking about that capitalism and the free market really allows for a lot of authoritarian government entities, which we call corporations, to exist. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is the leader at the top. The people that surround him are either the people that he must depend on to move things forward, or they're the ones, the cronies, right? They go in there. And then there is the labor force by which they are judged and put into the position that best meets the need of the corporation, right? Or of the state. And it just dawned on me. I was like, wow, like, and people are held down in this position. Like there's not a free market inside of it necessarily, but I mean, I guess there is. Like you apply yourself, then you can grow. But if you take, in many corporations, not all, but in many corporations, if you take two individuals, the profile of one and what they're able to accomplish, and the profile of the other and what they're willing to do for the corporation, right? The one who's more skilled at their job may not be the one who moves forward if the other one is willing to fight for the state, salute the flag.
Well, yeah, I think not all corporations are like a dictatorship. They're all a corporation is something that can be divided. The ownership can be divided. Mm-hmm. So that's what a publicly traded company is. That's what a stock is.
Are the shareholders not the deep state?
Kind of, right?
Like, I mean, are they not the ones? Are the big shareholders not the ones standing there having cocktails with the chairman of the board and discussing the current CEO and what's going on and the direction that they want to see going, and why they want to see that? Is that because it's what's good for the corporation, or because of what's good for the share? Right?
I mean, yeah, so...
It's what we've created. Like, it's what capitalism works towards.
Yeah, capitalism's not perfect.
No.
It does have a shallowness to it. It does have a selling out of things and, a gutting of a lot of stuff.
A lack of humanity.
Yeah, it's it encourages greed and stuff like that. There are some major problems with capitalism that isn't producing the most content people or the most, spiritually healthy people.
Far from it. I believe that we have dissected our spirituality in many ways. Again, like wedges. I think we don't look at it very holistically much anymore. But, like another thing of the algorithms is how siloed we're becoming, right? I am a this, this, this. That's how I identify myself. I'm a this, this, this. And I think before there was a time where you were just simply a human.
Yeah.
And then you might have identified, I guess, by what Lord you served, or then you would identify with what religion you were a part of.
And now it's Skynet will identify you as one of the Sims and what your role in the society is.
Right. And social media identifies you as this, and those who are helping out the politicians identify you as this, and we now all, like, when we talk about these things, we talk so many statistics. Again, it's not even like what are the real issues, but instead it always gets me where it's like 76% of all fill in the blank feel this way. And I'm like, well, I think I'm one of those. Like, nobody asked me. Like, how can you say that 76% when you don't actually know? It's 76% of the people who answered this survey on Facebook or who answered the phone when you called. How is that? How are we really identifying what's best for our society when we really are not getting I don't believe a true indication when we're spouting out statistics through media all the time? It's like gamified. We're gamifying so many things.
If you get the sports bookies,
yeah, right. Here we go.
To do betting on election outcomes.
Thank you. Yes.
You can start to see what electioneering is making competitive or non-competitive races. And it's something we could have information on.
Yeah.
And that's just how that kind of stuff is going. So we don't end up imploding or silencing actual progress through, here's my party rhetoric instead.
Yeah.
Then, like one of the cool things about having in capitalism all of these different corporations is we get all of these different takes at all these different strategies, all these different ways of solving a problem.
Innovation. I believe in that capitalism is an incubator for innovation. I'm all for that.
Yeah, that's why we all don't drive one type of Volkswagen.
Yes. and it is why technology improves. It's Pandora's box. Like, it's one thing, like you said, spiritually healthy, and I hear a lot of shamanism and tribalism, and I hear these things that we're not all that far removed from, I would like to imagine. Anyway, let's jump over to here. I'm sorry. we're going to segue a little bit. I want to get to your book.
Okay.
Honestly. All right. So here we go. We got Proxy right here. Tell us about Proxy.
I wrote that as a movie. It's called Proxy: When Robots Work Better. And it's set in the future where technology's replaced most people at their jobs, and the chemistry of revolution is there. And you've got Circos, which is an evil corporation that owns most of the workforce. And it's Hitler in a suit, right? And he's not marching Nazis in. He just owns all of the income of all the jobs, and the people don't. So there's, two competing presidential candidates with different solutions, one of which being essentially what I'm stating as an economic policy,
right,
and the other of which essentially, if COVID was really deadly, that can solve the problem also. And how we end up, how the story goes is we end up with a new constitutional amendment, and the thwarting of revolution and the ability to vote out RoboCop because we can vote for what automated labor does or doesn't do. So we're not under, techno-fascism just through software, but the self-driving car that holds a gun.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, as we're looking at the actual potentials and how to, surf that wave, that economic policy is in there. And I originally wrote this book for Joy and Wisdom, and put this, concept of a shared robotic labor system. And this publisher said, "You have 2 books in one book. It's a skateboarding trip around Europe. What are you talking about with robots?" Right? And I'm like, all right, fine. So I ended up just writing this story to illustrate the point. And I wrote it during the Occupy movement. I went out to Salt Lake City, Utah, and was meeting with a roboticist, Dr. Steven Jacobson. He's built some really cool stuff. His company was Sarcos. I stole the name and changed one letter.
Yeah. I was like, wait, didn't you just mention this?
It's such a good bad guy name.
It does. It is villainistic, isn't it?
So I ended up, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go meet this person. So I drive out to Salt Lake City, and we meet on a Friday. We're going to meet again on a Monday, and good conversations and stuff like that. And I'm like kind of trying to figure out, hey, what's the likelihood of how many jobs being automated in 10, 15, 20 years? These types of questions as far as from the people that are building these things. And I end up, some dready kid hands me a flyer, and I'm like, okay. Going to the library later, and there's this really cool looking library that's 4 stories tall, coming down like this swirling ramp, and in the middle of it there are these plateaued ponds with waterfalls and a sunk in amphitheater. And I see that dready kid there, and it ends up being a week later that became the Occupy movement.
Wow.
So Occupy Wall Street, the first global protest, essentially saying banking regulation, who are the police for international economic pressuring, if something's devaluing a country's currency,
right?
Who are the police? What is that? So international banking regulation and the ability to maintain stability and stuff like that is what that was about. Turned into other stuff, but so I ended up, long story short, living in a camper van at the Occupy movement and writing this book, which I originally titled it 2084, and printed up 100 copies of this short story and handed them out in a day at the park, and
that's awesome.
Got a bunch of donations, so I kept going on it. And yeah, it's a feature-length script. It's at the animatic stage. It's not something I'm putting a whole lot of time.
I'll be right back. Tell everybody where you can find it, though.
Oh, check out Proxy by JasonMallory.com.
You give some stats on it, too.
It's actually trading for about 4 times the cover price for a used copy on Amazon. Because I took it out of print. I have some still. But Yeah, it's trading for 4 times the price. So I think that's cool. Yeah, if you're interested in doing an animatic or anything, contact me at proxybysjasonmallory.com. And it's yeah, an interesting story. You can read it in 2 or 3 hours. It's not too long of a book. So if you have to do a book report or anything like that, it's heavy content and not a lot of reading.
I think it's been a fantastic conversation. I think we need to do it again.
Yeah.
I've found now this is the 13th episode we've done, and lucky number 13, brother. Well, actually, so a year ago yesterday was when I finished the stage as it is. So it's an anniversary night for us. So glad you're down here. We're going to play you some music.
Yeah.
You're going to join in and play it with us as well. We're going to jam tonight. It'll be good.
All right.
In celebration of that. But I find that every time, most every time that I finish the podcast, I go through the editing process, and while I'm doing it, I'm like, oh man, I should ask this. Oh man, I should ask this. Oh man, I should ask this. And I've had guests text me and be like, hey, if you ever want me back, like I thought I really should have talked about this, or I wanted to talk about this. And so I think with you, Jason, like there's no doubt very much want to continue this conversation, and also do it like there's some, as we've been going through this tonight, I've been thinking of other people that I'd like to bring into the conversation with us, and I think
that'd be cool.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to do all that kind of stuff. If people want to ask questions in the comments or something like that, and do like Zoom replies of here's these things, I'm up for those types of things too.
Awesome.
Integrating whoever, as long as they're sane people that aren't trying to hurt anyone.
Does Jason Mallory have a mission statement?
Nope.
I'm just wondering. Like somebody asked me the other day, they're like, "Well, what are you going to do with yours?" Right? Something to that effect. And I was like, hopefully, from here on out, because I can't say I've done this so far in my life, but from here on out, hopefully do no harm. Like that just kind of like my mission statement. But I think I'm wondering what the Jason Mallory mission statement is. You got a lot of things you got going on.
Yeah, I do have some goals. It's funny. Do no harm is the medical oath to become a doctor. So like basically one of the things I proposed, and it's funny, as I'm filling out the originating articles of the documents to form a nonprofit for a health facts app, my heart started to hurt bad. I could not physically do a push-up. Yeah. Just a strange correlation, but the ability to have an algorithm that can run through and produce what are the curative outcomes for every individual medical person, right? Rather than going to whichever doctor, run through these things that have mandated profit margins, rather than farming the sick of America, the ability to make us healthy and happy.
Yeah.
That would be much better. And so I proposed that, and there was an ominous fear that came from it, from the feeling in my heart and my physical inability to do a push-up at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I don't know, space lasers? I'm not really sure.
I want to, now that you mentioned, I want to get Eric Drew. He was on the 4th episode of this podcast. And Eric has an incredible story. I won't go through it right now. Anyone who's listening hasn't seen it needs to watch episode 4. There are 2 parts to it. We went a while. But Eric has a nonprofit based around, well, it's morphing, it's evolving, but close to what you were talking about, in the sense it was about circumventing what the profit-driven regimens of any given medical institution might be, but instead helping to educate and enable those who had serious or terminal illnesses, or the caretakers thereof, to make more informed decisions, and to be able to ask the right questions to know if they're genuinely getting the treatment that they should be getting, and not just the treatment that they give anyone who has this condition, because everyone is not the same. Our physiology is not completely the same.
Yeah, and there are a few things that are apparent to me. Like, Germany's been replacing spinal discs for 20 years.
Wow.
That's a very hard surgery to get in the United States.
Yeah.
Billionaires will leave the United States to go get spinal disc replacement and then come back. And 2/3 of Americans deal with back pain. And it comes from, most likely, like 90% of them, from damaged discs. If you take an MRI image and your discs are dark, they're dehydrated and they're popped. It's a causational issue for all kinds of other things. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So as far as getting, I've had doctors just end the conversation or refuse to look at, like an AI algorithm in regards to curative outcomes because they get paid to cut on somebody.
Yep. How do the incentive, right? Where does the incentive come from? And if the incentive was the successful treatment of any individual opposed to just treatment. Right?
Yeah. Health care doesn't mean health.
Right.
And if it's health control, it's torture for profit. And it's absolutely not compliant with the United States Constitution. Wow. I believe that the National Guard ought to get involved with the health and well-being of the American public in regards to what health care is, producing, and not just saying, oh, well, they swore an oath.
Yeah. And
you don't have the license to say otherwise. So that's what it is, right?
You also don't have the debt, right? What it takes to even get to that point. Like it's like you mentioned with teachers and the annual salary and the inability to be published, potentially very much the same thing when it goes into going into the medical field. It's like there could be really fantastic people, but they do not they are financially not able to pursue the degree, or looking at the backside of it, couldn't imagine the amount of debt that they'd have to incur to get there.
Yeah, I think our filtration systems through academia are not necessarily producing what's going to produce the most healthy people.
Right.
But it's producing an allegiance to an industry.
Yeah.
That's then, it's not the doctor's decision. It's some other portion of the health organization bureaucracy that is 1/5, $1 out of $5 in our economy. So disrupting that is a big chunk of...
1 out of 5?
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah. $1 out of $5 is something for healthcare.
Wow.
Yeah. So, that's not medical marijuana, man.
Yeah, right.
That's a big chunk of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
How do we, in the information age, this is curative and you're not addressing it, and I'm going to take your legal ability to be a doctor because you're offending not my spirit, my physical health and well-being, right? Having something like the National Guard be able to be enforceful and realistic would be cool, because the American Medical Association's not doing it. If you took a power drill to 51% of the spinal surgeons' L5S1 disc that 2/3 of Americans end up having an issue with because we sit in front of all these screens all the time, I bet you we'd have a different gold standard of surgery than the very barbarous vertebral fusions, where instead of fixing the broken part of the disc, you screwed screws into the vertebrae next to it and put a rod there, and now it doesn't work, and it's making the next disc do twice as much.
Right.
And 10 years later, you're doing another one, and in the meantime, you're buying narcotics from them.
Yep. I was actually going to say, how much of the opioid market is driving the decisions in the medical field, because it's a patch, it's the Band-Aid, it's a profitable Band-Aid for sure.
It's not healthy for people. It clouds hearts and minds.
Oh my goodness, I've seen it. Oh yeah, I've seen the opiates take people away for sure.
Yeah, and the ability to... I've gone through surgeries. I've gone through different types of pains, nerve pains and things like that from a motor vehicle accident, where an Advil's not going to cut it.
Right.
No. And the clarity that you could have from sobriety that isn't there, through that set of glasses.
Yep.
It's not just on your face; it's in your heart. It's very confusing. So what that does in the dilution of family structures and things like that, through people being under the influence of something and being with a person they wouldn't be with otherwise.
Yep.
So many effects that are diluting a lot of America.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very harmful. All right, man, the mosquitoes are starting to eat us up.
It's true.
So let's put a pin in it for tonight. Jason, man,
Cool.
it's been fantastic. Seriously, I can't wait until we get to do this again.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Peace out, everybody.